Hi, I'm Linda Saul-Sena, and I'm a community advocate for historic preservation. You're watching Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hello, welcome to Culture Vultures. I'm Sandy Frye, your host. Our creative producer is Nancy Cole, and this program examines the culture and arts all around Tampa Bay. Today, our subject is the Florida Trust Annual Conference, and our guest is a face that you should know. It's a pretty face, as a matter of fact, because she was a member of Tampa City Council for all of 20 years, and I can't believe that at all, Linda Saul-Sena. It is Linda Saul-Sena, and I will tell you this one anecdote that I think very clearly says she was the belle of the council. At Tampa City Council, there was always a time when the public could speak, and I happened to be in the audience at this particular time, and a very tall man walked up and looked at the 7 people there, and his eyes fastened on Linda. And he said, well, we have Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Everybody laughed, and the chairman said, get that man out, get that man out. But he was right. She was the prettiest of them all. And I can't believe that you were there for 20 years, not only because you don't look like you've been there for 20 years, but because that's a lot of work.
In hindsight, I was very patient. I think I've lost that capacity now, but I'm still an advocate for good things, just not as an elected person.
That's right. Well, and as an advocate, as a matter of fact, as an advocate for good things, she is on the board of the Historic National Trust, and the Historic Florida Trust Annual Conference took place recently, and that is what we're going to be talking about. These things that are worth preserving, because Florida has a long and very interesting history, and you know it well. Tell us about what happens in the trust and what they strive to do and what they have done so far.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here and explain because it's very confusing. First of all, there are 3 levels of preservation. The National Trust, and I wish I were, but I'm not on the National Trust Board. So that's a national nonprofit organization, and they designate buildings as being significant. And while it's tremendously important, it doesn't mean that that saves the building necessarily. Things can be designated, but it doesn't actually have legal protection. The Florida Trust for Historic Preservation is a statewide advocacy group. And we're going to look at photographs of some of the wonderful properties in the state that they've saved. And then locally, we have a number of neighborhood organizations, and we have a local umbrella group called Tampa Preservation, Inc. So I believe that you have to work on every level. Ultimately, legally, the only thing that really counts is what your particular city does. So for example, the city of Temple Terrace can protect buildings, the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County. It really, the others are sort of national and honorary and make you feel good and perhaps can get you tax credits. But when you look at trying to protect a building from demolition, it really depends on local protective layers. And even then, unfortunately, it could be demolished. So we're going to look today at a variety of images of some failures, some success stories, and some the jury's still out.
Right. Okay, well, let's begin.
Okay, I'd like to start with a current nail biter, and that is the Jackson House. The Jackson House is a boarding house in downtown Tampa that's quite close to our Tampa Union Station, which was our big railroad station, which fortunately got saved.
Right.
Joe Chalura, who was a county commissioner, and when I was on city council, we worked together and got some transportation dollars to rehab that building, which had been in terrible shape, but then we brought it back. And it's currently used every day by Amtrak trains.
Right.
But only a block from there is the Jackson House, which was where in the days of segregation, where the black travelers stayed, including musicians who came to Tampa to play on Central Avenue, which was Tampa's like the center of Harlem. It's where all the
Right.
the clubs were. So it's said that that's where Ella Fitzgerald wrote A Tisket, a Tasket.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's Calloway supposed to stay there. Many other jazz greats stayed there, as well as regular people, you know, longshoremen who'd come to town, or just, you know, black traveling salesmen.
Right.
But right now, as you can see from this picture, it's in terrible shape, and we're hoping that we're able to get the financial resources together to protect it. The jury's still out on this one. And I will mention at the same time, there are other very important buildings in the Bay Area that are in a state of uncertainty. There's the buildings in Manwagnon Park in Sulphur Springs. In Pinellas County, there's the historic Y downtown, which is a beautiful building that's kind of up for grabs. And there's a Bellevue Biltmore that's hanging on by a thread.
Right.
So we have lots of drama. Oh, in Tampa, we also have in McFarland Park a house called the Guida House from the 50s that's mothballed, but we need to get a use in there. And that's owned by the city. So preservation is a challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, and raising the money for it is one of the biggest challenges, I'm sure. Do the requirements, say, of the national are the same as the local or the state?
It really depends on what level of protection you're going for. Generally, preservation rules address the exterior of the building. Usually, they don't. If it's particularly local, they don't care what goes on inside, just so long as if you're driving by on the street, it looks good. So, for example, we'll look at some pictures now of Hyde Park.
Right.
Hyde Park was one of Tampa's first neighborhoods to be protected. And honestly, I was a young planner at the time. This was in the mid-'70s. Hyde Park was considered so unimportant that the school board was considering, the staff recommended to the board that they tear down Gorey School and make it into a parking lot for Wilson Junior High, which was a block away, because they said, it's an old neighborhood. These are old houses. There won't be people with young families wanting to live in them. And then a few years later, we protected the houses, got some reinvestment dollars in, got code enforcement in to clean things up, and Gorey School was bursting at the seams.
Right.
I think, like just about everything else in the world, it boils down to education. Educating the lenders who at the time had redlined Hyde Park, educating potential realtors that people might want to live in an older neighborhood, and educating the elected officials that they should consider reinvesting in the infrastructure in old neighborhoods. Because like all of us, after a while, you need a little spackle. You need to redo the pipes and redo the street lights. We're looking at different pictures of Hyde Park now, and you can see the beautiful relationship of the houses to the sidewalks to the street lights. And that kind of rhythm is really what makes a neighborhood beautiful. And most of Tampa's old neighborhoods have that rhythm.
Right. You know, a number of years ago, I went with I guess he was a contractor who was trying to save one of the old cigar factories. I think it was on Howard Avenue.
Yes.
And we went inside to look at what had to be done. And I think that one was a national project. And he could have purchased it at a very good price, only if he completely restored the interior to its full capacity, because there was a health clinic there, there was an a theater, there was a bar, there was a restaurant. I mean, there were any number of things that helped make
that's the building that's
city.
currently owned by the Hillsborough Educational Foundation.
Oh, really? That's
And the
nice.
and the main building has been fixed up, and that's where teachers can get school supplies from. But the auditorium where the theater was has not been restored, and there's some of us who love old theaters who have our eyes on doing that someday.
Well, can you only restore part of it? My understanding was that if he didn't restore everything, he would not get the approval of the federal government.
Well, honestly, you don't get tax credits if you don't do it right, but you can still do something with the building. Because if you think about it, a lot of places have been demolished. So
yeah, that's true.
better a half save than a demolition.
Right. Well, insofar as Tampa goes, I think I could probably name at least 4 things, beginning with the Plant Hotel and the University of Tampa, which has really saved the beautiful details of that. I'm sorry to say that the architect who designed and built the plant also did the first city hall.
No, county courthouse.
County courthouse, excuse me.
Which was demolished.
Yeah. Which was demolished, yes. And before I came, and I thought...
It was a lack of consciousness. It was a lack of education.
Right.
But the good news is that Tampa has benefited to the tune of probably over $20 million worth of grants from the state to local buildings, and the Florida Trust has always been the advocate for preservation grants to municipalities. One of the reasons why we're so excited at the conference being in Tampa is that this is the 36th annual conference, and it hasn't been here in 20 years. And we have so many more success stories to share. For example, all of the clubs in Ybor City, Ybor being, of course, our most historic neighborhood and our only national landmark district, the clubs all needed elevators because people who couldn't do the stairs couldn't get up to the 3rd floor, and they couldn't get federal money because you've got to be able to get the handicapped people around. Anyway, all of the clubs in Ybor, the Centro Asturiano, the Italian Club, the Centro Español, all benefited from grants from the state that the Florida Trust helped them secure.
Right. And they're still in operation.
Oh, yes. And in fact, our conference, of course, the kickoff is at the Italian Club, lunch at the Columbia, and then we have a lot of tours, mobile tours of Ybor City.
Oh, speaking of the Columbia, I'm sure that's one of the preserved restaurants.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And is it the oldest?
It's the oldest family-owned one.
And in the book that is the Columbia restaurant with oodles of wonderful photographs and recipes. I didn't know there were recipes in it, but I started fluffing through the pages, and I saw some wonderful things. But they also claim to be the biggest Spanish restaurant in the world. And I think that's true.
Yes.
I really do, because they also have satellite restaurants.
But the other thing about preservation is it's not just the building or even the neighborhood. It's big picture, which is why I wanted to serve on city council, making, for example, transportation decisions that impact preservation. As you know, for many years, we've had these huge oil tankers hurtling down 21st Street toward the Port of Tampa. And we just recently completed that giant, I call it very expensive spaghetti, you know, the giant connector between I-4 and the crosstown that gets trucks off of the street level and over to the port. What that allows us to do is not have a truck hit a building and set our entire National Landmark District on fire. The trucks will be rerouted, and 21st and 22nd Streets, which for years have been a menace to your health if you were a pedestrian, will be narrowed. There'll be bike paths, and we're taking the traditional beautiful lighting of Ybor City, the globe lamps, and placing them along there in benches. And brick crosswalks. So it'll be much more comfortable as a historic district to walk in.
Oh, that sounds very nice. Well, when you mention Ybor City, there is a certain Spanish flavor to a lot, of the buildings and so forth. And I think that, didn't you have some pictures
of Cuba? Yes. Havana, Cuba, and Tampa, Florida had a very rich and close relationship since the middle of the 19th century. And for years, people could go back and forth so easily between the two. And the architecture of Havana, which was, of course, an older and richer city, really influenced Tampa. The pictures that we're sharing now are images that I shot when I was in Havana with the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. They organized a trip to Havana to look at the architectural influences between Havana and Tampa. And you can see, how beautiful the buildings are with their deep porticos, which kept the hot sun off, and the beautiful wrought iron, but also how they're falling apart.
Yes.
I actually write for Creative Loafing about architecture and design, and I wrote an article called The Heartbreak of Havana, which is based on how magnificent the buildings are there and what terrible shape they're in.
I know. Well, the Tampa Museum of Art had that huge photographic exhibition, And it was enough to make you weep because it showed the glory that it had been.
Yes.
And it did not have now.
The faded elegance.
It was. It was very sad.
Hopefully that'll change, because that's a World Heritage Site, which is another thing that's great. It brings international attention to the issue, but it doesn't necessarily give you the money to fix up the building.
Well, what would be the ground level of what constitutes a World Heritage Site? What must it be?
A lot of really fabulous structures. I mean, a concentration of them, not like just one or two terrific ones, but an entire neighborhood that's intact.
Okay. And then the money to restore it, let's say, if extensive needs to be done.
It doesn't come with money. It
does
just comes
not.
with recognition.
And that must be why all the travel and tours always
Exactly.
and look to this historic
Absolutely.
this world architectural.
Well, I want to talk about a few success stories and heroes.
Good.
Because it's always fun. I love to talk about the good news. We usually start off with the ones hanging on by their fingernails and move to the happy stories.
Yeah.
We're going to look at a photograph of a house in St. Petersburg that was in terrible shape. It was called the Cade Allen Mansion, and it's right on Martin Luther King Boulevard in St. Petersburg. The guy who developed it, Cade Allen, loved stones. He had come from the Midwest. He loved working with natural materials, including stones. This house was built in the 1920s, originally 5,000 square feet, 5 fireplaces, and all this huge stone. So a young and bold and brave guy, Chris Westcott, is a hero. He invested, first he purchased the house, then he invested over $400,000 in redoing it. And when he noticed a few bees hanging around, but when he really got into the restoration, he had a bee extractor come over who found between 400 and 500 pounds of honeycomb, which caused some of those huge boulders to have to be removed. And this guy said he had never seen so many old beehives in his life. It was
They weren't full, were they?
50-year-old beehives. Yeah, 400
They
to
were?
500
The bees were
pounds.
still there?
Yes, that's why. That's why Chris hired a professional. You know, you don't do this on your own. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
But he moved in last week, and I just think that's marvelous that he is a preservation hero. Somebody who takes a great old house, needs a lot of work, and steps up.
Well, that's true, but he has all the honey he needs. As a matter of fact, he could probably pay for restoring the whole house. That's amazing. During the conference, there are all kinds of interesting, not only meetings, but places to see that the attendees can
Now,
go.
I know that this show is going to be aired after the conference is over, but I want to say that we're so excited about having put these trips together that Tampa Preservation will be interested in offering them moving forward. And Tampa Preservation is working with our sister organization, St. Pete Preservation. So moving ahead, we'll be doing a lot of things jointly. But if people are interested, they can go to tampapreservation.org, I think, and find out. But we're going to the Florida Southern Campus that has more Frank Lloyd buildings than any
And
place
they have
else.
been restored beautifully. They really have been. 2 years ago, we took friends who were stationed in Heidelberg, as a matter of fact, in the Army, and they were stunned at what a lovely complete structure it had. And the only thing that hadn't been done was sort of, I think, a kind of a little small painting around some work, sort of fretwork or something, and that's all been done. So it's going to be a party. I know that, and there are a lot of curators there who are very, very anxious to share as much information as they can, because it's really unique. I don't think there's another right structure that has this kind of extensive work. And so
That's
forth.
true.
Yeah.
And some of the other places we're going, where there's a tour of mid-century modern buildings in downtown St. Petersburg and Tarpon Springs. But I want to mention a few other places for people who are interested in preservation in Florida.
Yeah.
Bach Tower, which is located in the center of the state, is absolutely fabulous. It's amazing. And they charge a modest entry fee. It is so worth going to.
Right.
It is beautiful. And then we also have the Ringling Museum in Sarasota that is stunning and part of our heritage and something that the state is invested in preserving,
Yes.
which is great. And I think I also have a picture of a wacky, fun place to visit. It's totally below the radar screen, so I want to promote people going there. It's called the Bonnet House, and it's located in Fort Lauderdale. It's owned and managed by the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. And what you see there is what a wacky, wealthy artist from the 1920s built for himself and his wife. The image shows the bird cage in the center of the courtyard, but the artwork is just stunning and interesting. The house is so idiosyncratic. It was built before air conditioning, and it all opens up to the courtyard. And it's 20 acres between the bay and the Gulf, and it's just stunning.
Oh, it sounds good.
We have all these wonderful buildings here that tell our story, and we should protect them.
Actually, we should print the story. I can remember that I guess for the 200th anniversary of the United States, Florida did a literary map. And then they did an interesting sites, S-I-T-E-S, map. And I had never heard about 75% of them.
Wow.
And a lot of them are on the East Coast, but they were kind of, they were intriguing sounding. And I thought, they should really make many, many copies of this and not just use it for anniversaries, but give it to tourists, give it to school children, give it to anybody who wants to investigate both the grand and beautiful, the expertly presented, and then those cockamamie sites which probably won't get a historic preservation offer. But there are some very, very funny things along the way that you can see, everything from alligator farms and things like that. Florida mixes such a rich mixture of the beautiful and the informative with the wacky.
Yes,
and
it's all good.
Great.
Well,
Yes.
That's one of the things that people misunderstand about preservation. It doesn't have to be a palace. It doesn't. I mean, that doesn't hurt.
Right.
But we like places that are the corner store that's been there since forever. Or, for example, one of the little side trips on our tour is a bicycle trip called Bike Tampa History, which actually is available every Saturday, the first Saturday of the month, leaving from downtown, and it costs a $5 donation, and it's really great. It's biketampahistory.com.
That's very nice.
And you can bring your own bike or you can rent one.
Right.
And then there's a kayak tour from Weeden Island, and with archaeologists. So there are all these things available that all tell pieces of the story.
Oh, that's great. Well, I can see why you're very happy in participating in this. Not this adventure, but this creation, actually. The retaking of some beautiful structures and with it, history.
Yes.
Which is also a very nice thing. Tampa has, how many, would you just guess, historically preserved places?
I can't guess, because we have whole neighborhoods, which consist of many, many. Yes, we have Ybor City, Hyde Park, Seminole Heights, which has several different neighborhoods, where you have many, many, excuse me, contributing structures. And so you have the outstanding places like the Tampa Theater, which is such an icon for the city, or City Hall. But then we also have these just little bungalows scattered about.
Yeah. And that's that. And in addition,
and we need to protect it all. And we have a slide showing University of South Florida architecture students who are actually in this image looking at St. Pete for a downtown plan. But we're so blessed to have these smart kids at the University of South Florida who also look at neighborhoods throughout the Bay Area and come up with ways to protect them, to save them, to use transportation to link them. Because if we lose what's special, what tells our history, what's part of the warp and woof of our culture, then we're just, we call it generica. It could be any place, USA.
That's right.
The same rhythm of fast food and pharmacies.
Yeah. Well, I heard a long time ago, a story that when President Kennedy visited Tampa, he was followed by in all the newspapers in the world, obviously, and a reporter who stayed at one of the downtown hotels woke up, looked out, and immediately called his editor and said, "I don't know where I am." And his editor said, "Why?" He said, "I'm looking out at a minaret." And the editor said, "Oh, you're in Tampa."
Oh, that's a wonderful story. That's great.
I hope it isn't made up by someone, but it sounded so much like that's just what happened. I don't know of any other city who has as many minarets as we do and enjoys them so much. And we enjoyed your company and the information.
We have much to share.
Yes, you bet. And thank you for sharing it with us. Plan to be here again. Bye.